Good morning. So I'm getting back to this paper by Eugene Genlin. This one is called Experiencing a Variable in the Process of Therapeutic Change. And it's been a few days. So what was the main idea? The paper holds that both viewpoints express the need for science to move from a naturalistic and subjective observation to operationally defined observations. And I remember I didn't really know how to understand that exactly. I mean, is it like saying method? How to go from subjective observation to something that something you can do science with, like something that's repeatable, more abstract, conceptual. I'm just going to read this again before I jump back down to where I was. The purpose of theory is to lead to hypotheses and The purpose of theory is to lead to hypotheses and operationally defined observations which test hypotheses. Operationally defined observations. So he talks about subjective observation versus operationally defined observation. So as one, it's just like me sitting here, introspecting, noticing how I feel, versus something more like an experiment that can be repeated, and then you're getting observations from that. Also, does it mean no longer subjective? So something that can be, seen from the outside, or at least talked about. I don't recall that he really says specifically what operationally defined observations, like what's an example of that? What does that look like? Anyway, the purpose of theory is to lead to hypotheses and operationally defined observations which test hypotheses. It is the contention of this paper that theory, which conceptualizes subjective observations, can lead to operational hypotheses and research. Operationally defined observation is the aim, not the start of theory. The theory of experiencing, here presented, starts with subjective and naturalistic observation. It attempts to formulate theoretical concepts which can lead to operational research categories. So the theory of experiencing starts with subjective and naturalistic observation, attending to the felt experience in one's own body, which is deeply subjective, right? It attempts then to formulate theoretical concepts which lead to operational research categories. Right? Theoretical concepts such as experiencing, process, flow, these kind of things. I don't know. Operational and objective standards of science should be applied to the research procedures that result from theory, not to the naturalistic observations from which theory must start. Mm. The objective standards of science should not be applied to the naturalistic observations from which theory must start. Interesting. He doesn't say subjective, though. He only says naturalistic. But I wonder if he also means subjective. Because if you only allow yourself to work with or notice things that can be objectively measured or objectively perceived, then there's not really any way to talk about or reference subjective experience, which is what this is all about. If the start and the outcome of theory are confused, observations of central variables of human behavior will be kept out of science on the grounds that such observations are subjective. You're right. If you think you have to start with only objective observations, then you will just skip over all of your subjective human experience. Oh, that's just poetry. The present paper formulates 6 theoretical propositions which refer to a subjective process, experiencing. The paper will attempt to show that a theory which formulates concepts referring to a subjective process can lead to objective operational research. Okay, so we had 1, the experience process. I read that already. This was weird. I don't know what's going on, if there's supposed to be like body text there, but experiencing is a process of feeling. 2, experiencing occurs in the immediate present. Yeah, I read all that. Okay, I read down to here. Let me read this. This is from Freud. The ego still finds it difficult to nullify its repressions, even after it has resolved to give up its resistances. And we have designated the phase of strenuous effort which follows upon this laudable resolution as the period of working through. And then Chenlund says, genuine psychotherapy began at this point, that is to say, at the point of going beyond the intellectual approach by helping the patient to an immediate, present experiencing of his problems. Okay, From this discussion by Freud, we may formulate the 2 characteristics of experiencing stated above. 1, experiencing is a process of feeling rather than intellectual understanding. And 2, experiencing is a process which occurs in the immediate present of the therapy hour. Okay, so part 3, or section 3 or whatever. Experiencing is a direct referent. Let me now add a 3rd characteristic. Experiencing can be directly referred to by an individual as a felt datum in his own phenomenal field. Very frequently, during therapy hours, clients may be observed to refer directly to their experiencing. Experiencing is itself, of course, private and unobservable. However, gestures, tone of voice, manner of expression, as well as the context of what is said, are often observable indications of direct reference to experiencing. Certain characteristic forms of verbal expression are also observable indices of direct reference to experiencing. When a client refers directly to his experiencing, he is likely to use some demonstrative pronouns like this or it or that all tied up feeling. His verbal expressions indicate that he is pointing to a felt datum within himself. Let me cite some common observations from therapy hours in which experiencing is directly referred to. So I think that paragraph is pretty straightforward, right? You have a feeling in your body. You're like, oh, that thing, that feeling that I have in my belly, or that feeling that I have in my chest. Even if you don't know how to describe it, you're referring directly to it. And from the outside, of course, this is something that's going on internally within somebody, but there are signs that that's what's going on from the outside. Gestures, tone of voice, manner of expression, particular things that are said. Right, the classic story of how Carl Rogers and Eugene Gendlin came up with experiencing or came up with focusing in the first place was when they were doing all their research, and they noticed that successful clients, people who actually experienced change in therapy, were the ones who, on tape, in the recordings, they noticed that those clients had sort of fumbled and stumbled in their speech and paused and actually went back on themselves and said actually, I don't know, that's not quite right, kind of thing, rather than just explaining it perfectly from their heads. There was this sign that they were referring inwardly because they were pausing, changing their mind, trying to notice something and find a better word for that thing inside of them. So that's the kind of thing that it sounds like he's talking about here. So, clients frequently speak of feeling something without knowing what it is they feel. Both client and counselor call such a feeling this feeling and continue to communicate about it, although neither person knows just what that feeling is. At such times, both persons directly refer to the client's ongoing experiencing. They do so without a conceptualization of what the client refers to. The symbols used, such as the term this, do not conceptualize. They do not formulate anything. They only point. Such symbols are neither accurate nor inaccurate. They convey no information about the feeling. They only refer to it. I am giving the name direct reference to such pointing to present experiencing. I think that's pretty clear too. It just reminds me that in college I wrote a whole paper on, there's like a section in Hegel's phenomenology of spirit where he talks about that act of pointing to things and the significance of that and what it means to do that, to be like, I don't know what it is, but it's this. I can point to it. I know enough that I can direct myself to it and get other people to notice it, But I don't know anything about it, right? I don't know how to describe it. I don't have any concept of it. I don't know how to formulate it, but I'm aware of it, and I can direct myself and other people to it. a certain kind of knowledge, a certain kind of awareness in that. So, direct reference may also occur when client and counselor do know what the feeling is, but nevertheless need to refer directly to the experiencing and not to the conceptualization. For example, I have known all along that I feel this way, but I am amazed at how strongly I do feel that. And I would maybe just throw in my own example, being like, if it were referencing a concept, it could be like, I know that I have trauma related to my father, right? Or like, I know that I have this Oedipal complex, or I know that I'm codependent with my girlfriend, right? But those are like ideas and not really referencing anything that that person is experiencing right now, you know? It said nothing about feeling. It said something about an idea, but it had nothing about feeling, let alone how you feel right now. So that's how I'm understanding the difference. Let me cite another similar case where direct reference to experiencing is necessary, even though an accurate conceptualization is also present. A client has all along asserted something about himself. For example, I am afraid of being rejected. After many hours of therapy, he comes upon the feelings which make this so. He discovers anew that he is afraid of being rejected. Usually he is then somewhat troubled by the fact that the feelings are new, different, amazing, yet no better words exist for them than the old trite, I am afraid of being rejected. The client then struggles to communicate to the counselor that now he really feels it, that the concepts are old, but the experiencing is new. I've had that experience a lot. Like going on a walk and thinking aloud, journaling, being like, finding myself describing an experience in the same way that I've described it many, many times before, but like very much feeling like I'm hitting on it for the first time in a way. And that's such a weird experience to be like, whoa, I feel like I just discovered this, but I know I've said this before. Direct reference to experiencing is also noticeable in many clients' reports about their experiencing between therapy sessions. Clients often report being disturbed, unsettled, a churning, a something going on in them, but they may or may not know what it is. Yeah, that seems pretty straightforward, right? They're just noticing some kind of internal experience, some felt sense, but they don't know how to talk about it. It's just this. I have this feeling. In these observations, it is clear that the client is referring to something other than conceptualizations. He is referring directly to his present experiencing. Four, experiencing guides conceptualization. A fourth characteristic of experiencing lies in the client's use of it to guide him toward increasingly accurate conceptualizations. A client may feel a feeling and refer to it for quite some time before attempting a formation of it in terms of concepts. When he has attempted such a first formulation, he often considers what he has just said and then feels, yes, that's it, or no, that isn't quite it. Often he does not know how what is said differs from what he feels, but he knows it differs. In these examples, it is clear that the client refers directly to his experiencing and is checking his first rough conceptual formulations against his present experiencing. In this way, present experiencing guides conceptualizations. So again, this is one of Genlin's early papers, so he actually doesn't have that term focusing yet, let alone the 6 steps that he lays out in the book. But that is, what the fuck's that step called? Like, is it resonating? Whatever, it's the step where you say, you find a handle and you speak it, right? And then you check back against your felt sense to see if it's accurate. That process, that moment within the focusing process is what he's talking about here. It's like, oh, I feel sad. Yeah, that's it. Or, I feel sad. No, that's not it. And you know it's not it, but you don't yet know like what it is. But you can definitely feel that it's not sad. And so you now can try something else, try to conceptualize it differently, and that new conceptualization will be more accurate. So far, I have said about experiencing that it is felt and occurs in the immediate present, that the individual refers directly to it as a datum in his own phenomenal field, and that he guides his conceptual formulations by such direct reference. I guess I'll do this. 5. Experiencing is implicitly meaningful. The fact that direct reference to experiencing can guide conceptualization implies a 5th characteristic of experiencing. It is implicitly meaningful. The implicit meaning is only felt and may not become explicit until later. Yet this implicit meaning can guide conceptualization. Okay, so just going off of what's been said in this paper, I don't know what implicit meaning is yet. So I'll just keep going and see if he explains it. Here's something we call a feeling, something felt in a physical sense, yet later on, the individual will say that certain concepts now accurately represent that feeling. The feeling, he will say, was such and so all along, but he didn't know it. He only felt it. He felt it in such a unique and specific way that he could gradually, by directly referring to it, arrive at concepts for it. That is to say, the feeling was implicitly meaningful. It had a meaning which was distinguishably different from other feelings and meanings, but its meaning was felt rather than known in explicit symbols. Okay, so you basically said this, right? That the feeling was implicitly meaningful, that there was meaning in it, but it was not yet explicit, right? It was in it, it was in there, and almost like hidden in a way. That's what I'm using as another word for implicit right now, almost like hidden in there, but definitely there. It was there enough that, right? It's not like completely invisible and unrecognizable. It's there enough that that feeling was meaningfully different than others. But what it was, he couldn't say, right? It was, again, just it's this, it's not that other thing, it's this very specific thing, but I don't know what it is, but I can feel it. And then later on, you find words for it, and it comes to have explicit meaning. If I may speak of felt meaning, I am, of course, using the term meaning in a very special sense. Such meaning is somewhat different from the sense in which concepts or words have meaning. Here's an example of the difference. One concept or one word has a univocal single meaning, whereas one feeling often implicitly contains very many different conceptual meanings. That's interesting. Because you could say, like, one concept or one word means many different things to all sorts of different people. But if you go by the idea of, like, dictionary definition, it means one specific thing, and that is a very common way of thinking about language and ideas. It's like, it means this. So you shouldn't use that word in this other way because it doesn't mean that. That's the kind of approach to language that it sounds like he's talking about here. Whereas one feeling often implicitly contains very many different conceptual meanings. Now that's confusing, though, given what he said in the last paragraph, right? That it was like a feeling is implicitly meaningful, which is to say that it is you may not know how to describe it, you may not have words for it, but it's distinguishably different from other feelings and meanings. And now here he's saying that one feeling can implicitly contain very many different conceptual meanings. So that there's a whole variety of things that are implicit in that feeling. It's not just one thing, which is kind of what it felt like what he was saying in the previous paragraph. But like a dream symbol, one felt datum may give rise to a great many complex conceptualizations. Interesting that he mentions a dream symbol. I don't really know what to make of that. He has a book on dreams. I haven't read it. I haven't otherwise thought about or read about dreams that much. I guess the idea is, like, a symbol in a dream can be interpreted, maybe that's an important word here. It can be interpreted in all different kinds of ways, right? Meaning it can be given a great variety of conceptualizations, right? You can explain it in a bunch of different ways, this one symbol from the dream. So, like a dream symbol, one felt datum may give rise to a great many complex conceptualizations. A client in therapy can work with one felt referent which implicitly contains very many complex meanings that may become conceptualized only much later. Yeah, and what I'm hearing in that sentence is even just that you can spend time being highly aware of a particular feeling, of a particular felt sense, and not be successful in finding a handle for it. Like you might not, but you are still spending time with it. And that in and of itself is important and impactful. Right? And as you spend more time with it, eventually you find words for it, you find a handle, you become able to conceptualize it down the line. The following is an example of how felt implicit meaning becomes conceptualized. A person may say, I have to go to a meeting tonight, but for some reason, I don't want to go. Now, from this verbal content, we have no way of getting at why he doesn't want to go. Only he has a way of getting at the feelings, and this way lies through only he has a way of getting at the feelings, and this way lies through direct reference to his present experiencing about it. As he refers directly to his present experiencing, he may say, well, I don't know what it is, but I sure don't want to go. He may continue to refer to his present experiencing, and it may change even without further conceptual formulation. Or, as he continues to refer to it, he may say, I don't want to go because Mr. X will be there, and he will argue with me, and I hate that. This verbal content will have arisen for him from a direct reference, a direct grappling with his present experiencing. Nor is this all the meaning that might emerge as he grapples with his present experiencing. A little later he may say, oh, it isn't that I hate arguing with Mr. X. Actually, I'd love to argue with him, but I'm afraid he will make fun of me when I get excited in arguing. In this example, the individual forms concepts on the basis of direct references to his experiences, to his experiencing. He is not simply using certain concepts which accurately say something about him. He is not deducing from his behavior that he is afraid of being ridiculed. Rather, he forms the conceptualizations on the basis of direct reference to present experiencing. I don't know that I've heard him mention that deduction before as a way of talking about how some therapy works, right? Of like, here's this theory, here's this model of like how humans work, and I know that theory, so I'm going to use it to explain to myself my own behavior, and then derive how it is that I must feel according to this theory, rather than the opposite direction of referring directly to your own experiencing and discovering it from there. It's like two very, very different ways, right? And it's how we do, like if you're doing psychological research, or if you are marketing and you're trying to understand your audience. This is like an area in which this happens a lot. You like take theories of human behavior, theories of human functioning and emotion and all these things, and you theorize about these people who you don't know, trying to explain how they must think given their behavior and given the circumstances, right? But it's applying theory to them and interpreting them, deducing how it must be, rather than actually just listening to them. as he refers directly to the felt datum from which all these verbalizations spring, he finds new aspects which he can now differentiate, all of which were implicitly contained in his not wanting to go to the meeting. He may all the while be feeling intensely and working with his fear of being ridiculed and his feelings of inadequacy. A book might be written about all the meanings which are implicitly contained in this one felt datum of directly referred to experiencing with which he is now working. Although not conceptualized, all these meanings may be in the process of changing. Such meanings are felt as a single, this way I feel, this way I feel, this way I feel. The implicit meanings can be complex, multiple, and can contain all sorts of perceptions and differentiations of circumstances, past and present. Thus, present experiencing is an implicitly meaningful felt datum. I like that sentence. A book might be written about all the meanings which are implicitly contained in this one datum of directly referred to experiencing. Right? This one feeling I have is so rich, there's so much to explore in there. So many different ways which I can attempt to find a handle for it or to conceptualize it and to find meaning in it, that I can write an entire book on this one feeling. Yeah, okay. Well, I'm going to stop here. Pick back up next time at 6.